The White Bear Micropub on Southbourne Grove is a proud supporter of AFC Bournemouth and sponsor of all departments. Head to the Bear for real ales, locally produced food and plenty of good conversations about the cherries. Check out www.thewhitebear.co.uk.
Here come the cherries and we're heading for the top of the tree. Bournemouth is a team that's going to show Division 3. Here come the leaders and the scorers at the Saturday, showing how to win the Southern way. So we sing, come on Bournemouth, come on Bournemouth. While you're out there winning, hear the shouting and the singing. We sing, come on Bournemouth, come on Bournemouth. Here come the cherries, here come the cherries, here come the cherries, number one.
Hello and welcome to All Departments. There was no love lost between our beloved Cherries and Stoke City this Valentine's weekend, as the Potters took all the points after an off-colour performance from our heroes in red and black. Here to chat about a painful afternoon at the court is Sam Stapleton.
Sam, welcome to All Departments.
Hi.
So, I think like most Cherries fans, I went along to Dean Court yesterday in the hope that we'd profit from what appeared to be a winnable game against Stoke. They're in bad form, they had a couple of key players missing, but in the event, we gave one of our worst performances of the season, didn't we?
Yeah. I think I went into it looking similar to you. I thought it was winnable, but if we'd come out of it with a point, I would have been happy. Didn't really expect it to go quite as it did, especially saw a few players out. Arnautovic not even in the 18. I thought we stood a chance, but it didn't go that way. We were on top for, I don't want to sound too much like Lee Bradbury here, but we were on top for the first 8 minutes, playing really, really well. And then just one miss pass, and we took us till, first 10 minutes of the second half to really get back into it.
Yeah, we did definitely look competitive early on, and there wasn't anything in it. I mean, they looked okay as well, but after that, the house collapsed around us. Just a word on the team, only one change. Eddie brought in Junior Stanislas and Matt Ritchie dropped to the bench. On the podcast last week, I said that I thought that we looked more of a threat in terms of crossing the early balls in when Stanislas came on against Arsenal, but Afobe had already departed by the time those crosses started to come in, and I was hoping the two of them would be able to link up effectively. So I'm sure that Eddie had other reasons for that. Matt Ritchie's form has been, it hasn't been the sensational form of last season, but there may be other reasons for that. So I think most people would have thought before the match that was not a massive surprise, and I was quite happy to see Stanislas back in the team. What about you?
Yeah. Speaking on Twitter before the game, someone suggested that we should bring Stanislas back in for Pugh. And although we were saying Pugh's been sort of hot and cold in his form, I agree that Ritchie's not been... Well, he hasn't been poor by any means, but he's not been to the standard of kind of what we're used to with Ritchie. So I wasn't shocked to see Stanislas come in for him at all. And I thought it was more likely that he was going to come in for Ritchie than Pugh, at least.
And as we've mentioned, we got off to an okay start. It looked pretty even. And then you mentioned the misplaced pass. Now, this hasn't really featured in any of the match reports that I've read or seen it on any of the highlights, if you can call them highlights, that I've watched either on the television or little clips online. But our first goal came from, the lead up to their first goal, not our first goal, I wish it had been ours, came from a mistake by Simon Francis, who kicked the ball out for a throw-in when he looked like he was trying to pass to either Steve Cook or Charlie Daniels, but the ball went between them and went out for a throw. Now, this was about a minute before they actually scored, but the ball then never left our half, and we didn't do anything else very well. There was a few uncharacteristic errors that led up to that goal, weren't there?
Yeah. It's strange for us. It was quite, well, I suppose it's a curse to the commentator in some ways. A couple of minutes prior to that, I commented on how it was really nice to have two very ball-playing centre-halves. And then, the next thing I knew, Francis was passing it straight out for a throw-in.
And, that allowed Stoke, to seize control of our half, which we really shouldn't have let them, because it led to the goal. And there's a couple of other bits that I recall leading up to the goal where we should have done better. There was one point, which was quite near me in the main stand, when Harry Arter and Dan Gosling were going for the same ball in a tight situation with a couple of Stoke players, and then they both hesitated, and then Stoke were able to nip in and again seize control of the ball. We gave Shaqiri too much space to get the pass off. That it wasn't really the assist, because he passed the ball into the penalty area, and then this immediately led to the final error, which was again Simon Francis, who he sort of flicked his leg up behind him to make contact with the ball. But unfortunately for him, it fell straight to Imbula, who they've signed recently for 18 million. And, he showed where some of that money may have went with a superb left foot volley that gave Boris no chance. But, from our point of view, it was a goal that could have been prevented at several stages, wasn't it?
Yeah. It's Simon Francis. It kind of really strange for him to have. He did have an off day, I think. I said after the game, he's one of our most consistent players, so I guess he's allowed one off day in 4 years. But I think that first goal was incredibly unlucky on our behalf, because Simon Francis just had to get the block in, didn't he? Any way he could. And it was kind of unlucky that it just happened to fall straight to their player, who hits it on the volley and scores. It came almost out of nowhere. They were dominating play, but there was no real build-up for their goal. It kind of just fell straight to him.
Yeah. He struck it so well that I guess not any other, but on other occasions, it goes wide or it goes miles over. This time he caught it just right. And then you look back, as we are now, and analyse the little details leading up to the goal. But, it was really, really disappointing. We talked now about Simon Francis. You mentioned there that in the time he's been with us, he's been, right up there as one of our most consistent performers. And it was really noticeable. He made a couple of great tackles yesterday. There was one in the first half, it may have been before the goal, when I think Shaqiri, who I was surprised how fast he was bombing away from him, and he seemed to have a yard and a half on Francis. Francis threw the tackle, and I thought he's not going to get there, and this is going to be, a yellow at the least. And he got the ball, and he did similar in the second half, although I didn't have as good a view of it. But, I like you said, one off day in 4 years or whatever it is understandable. But I don't think I've ever seen him play so badly.
No. And I don't know what you can really put that down to, really. I can't think of anything in particular. I thought he was really, really coming into that centre-half role. So it's not even like you can say we're playing in what is a new position to him, and maybe he's not fully used to it yet, because, he's arguably been our best centre-half since moving there as well.
Yeah, he's been outstanding. He's been outstanding at right back. He's won Player of the Season, and he's been superb at centre back. But it kind of stuck out amongst a few below par performances, and unfortunately a couple of mistakes from him, and they scored. And then the game, it kind of completely changed, because obviously they're the away team. They play in a certain way, and they were able to put their game plan into full effect. Every time after that we had the ball, I especially noticed this in the first half, maybe not so much in the second, but they had all of their players in the lines and inside their own half, and they were marking us really tightly. And as a result of that, or partly as a result of that, we started to look quite ragged because they gave us no time on the ball, so some of our first touches were poor. Any slightly misplaced pass, they were nipping in to cut it out, and we just had nowhere to go. It was quite frustrating to watch, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think as I've been watching this over the years, I've always said how we've struggled to play against teams that kind of stick 10, 11 men behind the ball and restrict all space. And I don't think it was entirely down to the system, although we did change it in the second half, but them really packing that midfield and not giving Art and Gosling especially anywhere to go forced us down the wings, and then it was quite easy for them to snuff us out down there as well. It was kind of difficult. We had a lot of possession. We had both Cook and Francis in their half, large parts of that first half, but we never really looked that much of a threat.
No, and the other thing Stoke did, and from their point of view, they did it really well. From ours, it was kind of maddening, was that they walked the line of the rules of the game very close to the edge. And that started even before the goal with Juff, when he got booked after a couple of 2 or 3 actually. Pretty, I was going to say horrendous. They weren't horrendous, but very forceful challenges which went beyond what's acceptable. And he probably would have got the yellow for the first one if he hadn't have done it so early in the game. And throughout the game, they were good at that, what sometimes is termed professionalism. Although that seems like a little bit of a kind word for it. And you could see that, I don't know about you, but Graham Scott, the ref, he came into the game on the back of one when he refereed a Spurs match. I think it was against Swansea. And he sent Kyle Walker off, I think, and he just had a terrible game. And he hasn't refereed that many Premier League games. I think something like 3 or 4 in 18 months. And both teams can do this. And Eddie Howe and the Bournemouth players are not adverse to trying to convince the officials of the legitimacy of their play, even though it may not always be quite within the rules of the game. But I got the feeling that Mark Hughes and his players had said, this guy is going to bend under pressure from, the players, because he's going to be nervous about refereeing this game. He's not going to be confident, and he was criticised a lot for his last one. And I thought, and I mean, it isn't necessarily something you want to show your approval of, but I thought they did that much more successfully than us yesterday, didn't they?
Yeah. A friend that I sit with him at the games was pointing out how many more fouls they made to us and how they weren't picking up cards for it. I don't think this was bias, but I thought their fouls were very niggly, and it's ones that you see a lot of people get away with. A lot of us might have been calling for cards during the game for a few of their players. I think Eric Peters took him a very long time to pick up that yellow card. But yeah, no, they did do it really well. I suppose for all they've changed, probably this year, towards the end of last year, all the players they brought in changed the philosophy. They're still very physical, and they're still Stoke.
They've certainly still got some of that Stoke gene in them, there's no doubt about it. I mean, my favourite part of that, although I preferred if it hadn't happened, was after the goal. I think it was in about the 36th, 35th minute, something like that, was when Shaqiri did about 15 horizontal pirouettes when he was fouled, or supposedly fouled, certainly not fouled badly, by Mark Pugh. I couldn't believe his sort of like chutzpah in keeping rolling. It was just like he so overdid it that it was, you thought, well, is the referee actually going to buy it? Because it was such a poor attempt to con the referee, wasn't it?
It was. I mean, did Pugh get the ball?
I can't actually remember the foul itself. I can only remember seeing this man kind of spinning like a washing machine on, the rinse or whatever, and just going and going and going, and then he stopped for a second, and then he rolled a bit more after that, as if he had a little bit of momentum left. But it it was really obvious play acting, and Graham Scott still pulled out the yellow card.
It's a shame, because that's what Premier League football gets mocked for a large amount of the time, is exactly that. And then you still see players do it, and you still see it rewarded.
Yeah, and I mean, we're not, like I said, naive. And I think also, when you look at your own team, you tend to be, I mean, I certainly am, I think most football fans are, a little bit more forgiving of any kind of what would be interpreted, if the opposition did it, as play acting or even cheating. And then when you look at the opposition, of course, you condemn it as if you wouldn't even dream of approving of your own team doing it. But I think you just see it in a different light. And yeah, I mean, that was one of the aspects of the game that Stoke were able to put into effect in terms of their game plan very effectively. And it worked very effectively for them. And, you know, that's the kind of reputation that they've had for this kind of negative football and all this theatrics and stuff. Well, I think the football may have improved. The theatrics have stuck around. But anyway, the half following the goal was probably, well, we were quite poor in the first half against Southampton, as I recall, and there was a few other games where we obviously got trounced, although games like City, Man City away, Tottenham at home, it was clear that the golfing class was the reason that we were unable to cope with the opposition. Norwich away I didn't go to, but I do remember that being widely condemned as a poor performance. But the last half hour of the first half, maybe slightly more than that, yesterday was probably the worst I've seen us play, and certainly the most frustrating I feel I've seen us play this season. And the players, they just looked, you know, I was really surprised by this, kind of baffled about what to do with the ball. Like, on several occasions, it was like players would have the ball, they put their arms outstretched and their palms up, and you could kind of see them moving their mouths, and you get the feeling they were sort of squabbling with each other. It really wasn't like us, was it?
No, not at all. Yeah, it was really frustrating to watch. I didn't really put that down to us at the time. I didn't really put that down to us necessarily playing poorly. I thought they were restricting the space and stopping us playing the game that we wanted to play quite well. But it was far too often you'd see us start to attack down the left-hand side. Sermon almost playing as a centre-back, allowing Cook and Francis to move forward a little bit more. And then Arter and Gosling, just whoever wasn't on the side with the player with the ball, didn't look like he knew how to support whoever was on the ball. And so we'd start to attack down one wing, and, you know, Pugh and Daniels would give it a go. No one would really want to run at them. So we'd turn back, we'd give it back to Sermon, he'd switch the play, and then the exact same thing would happen down the other side. And that was rinse and repeat for almost 30 minutes, it felt like.
Yeah, it was. And then there was quite a few what appeared to be mistakes, but as you said, them, and we mentioned it a minute ago, them restricting the space and playing so tight and defending their half, you know, so stoically and not caring about anything else. Yeah, it made us look bad, and in some ways we were the authors of our own downfall as well. And they had other chances though. There was one that John Walters put into the side netting from where I was, which was kind of in line with Walters, and on that side you could see that it hit the side netting. But I heard the Stoke fans cheer, and everyone's been in that situation where you've seen the net ripple, but it's actually, you know, not actually gone in. And that was far too easy a chance for him. Having watched it back, there was a throw in, it bounced, and he just swiveled, and it was, you know, a nice little swivel, and cracked the shot in. And I think it might have troubled Boris had it been on target. But I hate to say this because it feels like it's just one long pop at Simon Francis. If you watch it back, you can see Francis duck as the ball comes towards him. And I probably would have ducked as well, but I'm not Simon Francis, and there's a reason he's in the team and I'm not. And yeah, I don't know what view you had of that, but I was mightily relieved it didn't go in, and then I was surprised to see our normally titanic defender just ducking out of the way.
Yeah, I mean, from where I was in the East Stand, there were a few jeers after that didn't go in and they cheered. But from where I was, that looked into a split second for me as well. So I felt like I couldn't mock them because I thought it was in. And yeah, my first thought was that Francis was his fault as well. And it doesn't happen often. And it does feel like a big pop at Simon Francis. By no means would I want us to drop Simon Francis. I don't think that's what we should be talking about. But it's interesting that a lot of the blame recently has gone on Steve Cook for making similar mistakes. I suppose Francis has earned a bye a little bit in that regard.
I think we have come up from League One with essentially the same defence, and we haven't strengthened at the back, with the exception of bringing in, the odd older experienced head, Sylvain Distin, Ian Hart, Elliot Ward to a certain extent, although it didn't really work out for him. And that back four, and you include Tommy Elphick, I suppose, if you take one of them out, has been there all the time. And I was going to say, by and large, almost all the time have performed well. This season, we've leaked more goals, and we've been exposed at times. And yesterday was one of those times. But in terms of making changes, Eddie tends to wait for the form to drop, and for sort of serious questions to be asked, and for him to have to ask himself before he'll take any action. But then he doesn't actually shy away from what he has to do. And we've got obviously the cup coming up, and we'll see wholesale changes for that. But in terms of the Watford game and fitness, Tommy Elphick should be a lot closer to being fully match fit by then, particularly if he plays against Everton, which I expect him to. And therefore, he's got, a few options, hasn't he? He's got an option of keeping it like it was yesterday with those four at the back, taking Smith out, putting Francis back in his old position at right back, and Cook and Tommy in the middle, or taking Cook out, putting Tommy in, leaving Frano there, and leaving Adam Smith. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw some sort of change in personnel at the back against Watford. What do you think?
I'd keep it the same. I know it seems strange coming off of, we've conceded 3 there. Conceded a couple against Arsenal, but I think we're kind of expected to concede against Arsenal no matter who's playing at the back. I'm not a huge fan of Sylvain Distin, and I rate Tommy Elphick quite a bit. But with the defence, I think it's quite important that your defence remains quite settled, and I think that's why it hasn't changed really over the few years. Our defence is kind of known. I remember last season we were scoring an awful lot of goals, and any outsider that I'd speak to would kind of be like, you might be scoring quite a few goals, but if you go up to the Premier League, your defence is probably not going to quite cut it. And that has kind of showed this season. Our goal difference isn't the best, even compared to the teams around us. I think that is kind of a byproduct of the way we play, though, with the way we play wing-backs that like to bomb up and down. I think you're always going to leave gaps at the back. And so then you need players like Cook and Francis who are a bit more mobile to kind of make up for that.
Yeah. I think that questions have been asked about the defence this season that were asked in some quarters last season as well, but the success we were having, the goals we were scoring and all that, made those questions not seem that relevant. This year, if we were to go down, fingers crossed that won't happen, that will be pointed at. And the fact that we've invested, millions of pounds further up the pitch, particularly in the forward and wide positions, and not invested anything apart from Sylvain Distin's wages in the defence, yeah, that's really going to be used to sort of hammer the transfer policy should we drop out of the Premier League. But fingers crossed, like I said, that will all be irrelevant come May. Anyway, half-time came along. I just wanted to mention the frustration from the crowd in the first half and on the half-time whistle. There were times in the first half, I mean, after the goal, when we seemed to be able to do nothing right at certain points, and you know, you're going to understandably at times hear moans and groans and people going, oh, when another pass goes astray, and obviously it's quite a few thousand people making that noise, the players can hear it. But there was one or two bits that I thought this really isn't that helpful. I think at one point Francis took a free kick, but before he took it, I think it was Francis, it was in our half, sort of not that far away from our penalty box, and before he took it, he was looking to see, where to put it, and we're all marked up tightly as we've discussed, and there was a delay, a little bit longer than normal, and a lot of the crowd around me, and I think around the ground, were giving it the old "come on, get on with it" and all that. I thought that's really not that helpful. It's only half an hour gone or whatever, and he's just in no rush. We're 1-0 down, but there's no need to pressurise him to get this free kick off. And then at half time, and it wasn't that audible, but you could certainly hear it, there was booing from the crowd. I mean, there was at full time as well, but that may have been related to the referee at full time. He hadn't really hit his stride in the first half, the ref, and certainly hadn't incurred the ire of the home crowd. And well, in some ways I think people have paid their money, they've got a right to boo, they've got a right to throw their frustration. Although my overriding feeling about those two episodes that I mentioned, with the free kick and with the booing at half time, was it wasn't really that helpful. What did you think?
Well, I don't really agree with people booing the players in the first place. I think they're entitled to do it, but it's certainly not something I agree with. I was definitely frustrated at half time, but I wasn't too worried, and I definitely wasn't angry enough to be booing or voicing those kind of frustrations, because I just thought, we've largely dominated possession, and there's a large amount of the game to go. We've seen us come back a couple of times this season, so I didn't. It's not like we were 2 or 3 down, and it's not like we're in any kind of position like maybe Villa were today, where the players have been accused of not putting in the effort. I don't think that's ever an issue with our players, so I can't see why you'd have justification to boo them. No,
it seems a little bit premature. Like you say, if we'd have gone on a long losing streak and one inept performance after another, I would understand. I might have enjoyed it myself. I certainly did. I did when Paul Groves was the manager. That you could sort of see some justification for it, but it isn't so much the booing and the signs of frustration in the crowd. It's the impact it has upon the players and upon the performance. And logic would suggest that whatever the crowd are doing should have no impact upon the way the team are playing. But everybody knows that isn't true. And if you get a positive, vibrant atmosphere, it really spurs the players on. And obviously the thing works both ways, because the players feed off the crowd feed off the players. But if you get a negative atmosphere, it has obviously the opposite impact, which I'm not suggesting that this can, on this occasion, be used as a reason for our defeat yesterday. I was just a little bit surprised that it came so quickly from certain areas, certain people. I mean, it must have been a few thousand in the crowd, when we've had, one success after another, and we've cut it in the Premier League despite some awful luck with personnel. And I was just surprised that one poor, and it was poor, half-hour spell in a match incurred any amount of wrath whatsoever.
it just added to the whole negative vibe of the day in the end, didn't it?
All Departments is sponsored by the White Bear Micro Pub on Southbourne Grove, the perfect pre- and post-game venue to chat about the game, and only a 25-minute walk to the ground, or there's a bus stop right outside. Wear your AFCB shirt on any match day and receive 30p off each pint. Check out www.thewhitebear.co.uk. Eddie took action immediately at the start of the second half. I think the last time I saw him do that in such a decisive fashion was for the second half against Southampton. On this occasion, he changed the formation and went to the rarely seen 2 up front, 4-4-2 formation. We haven't seen much of it for quite a while. Dan Gosling went off to make way for Josh King, who played obviously up front on this occasion with Benicophobe, and Mark Pugh, who we discussed his booking, justified or otherwise, he was on a booking, and so Eddie took him off, probably for tactical reasons as well, and brought Matt Ritchie on, and it gave us a boost. And I mean, we conceded the goals far too quickly in the second half, and we'll talk about those in a second or two, but we immediately looked more positive, and Benicophobe, who we haven't mentioned so far, looked thoroughly isolated in the first half and came into the game a bit more when he had a strike partner yesterday, although his chances were, I think he only had one, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute as well. But we did have a chance before they scored when Simon Francis sent the ball back in from, I think, a clearance, or maybe a clearance from a corner. Andrew Selman flicked it over the defender, and Josh King was in, but the ball was quite high, and it was falling, and he was 1-on-1 with Butland, but Butland was able to come out and get contact with the ball first before King could really make contact himself. And at that point, although it didn't last long, I thought we have made the changes that could get us back into the game.
Yeah, I'm not usually an advocate for making changes at half-time, which is interesting in this game. I tweeted at half-time saying I'd quite like to see Gosling and Pugh off and Ritchie and King come on.
You should be the manager, Sam.
Yeah, I did get a comment like that from someone, but I just kind of... I didn't think Pugh was having his best game. I thought Stanislas needed to stay on because he's been in better form than Pugh, and he just has a bit more pace to kind of get him behind. Ritchie, I mean, as I'm sure we'll come on to later, has that knack of just being able to get something out of almost nothing. And then King, he's quick and a bit more direct. He'll play a bit closer to Benicophobe and be able to get him behind. I think we saw that quite a lot, so that was really good. I don't know if it was 4-4-2. I suppose it was, but it might just be that in my mind, 4-4-2 in the traditional sense is kind of dead, and you don't really see it anymore. And I think Josh King was dropping into that number 10 role an awful lot, and probably playing a lot more like Eddie Howe wanted him to towards the start of the season when he paired him up front with Wilson. And we didn't really see that towards the start of the season, but I thought Josh King made a huge impact coming on yesterday, and I kind of would be disappointed if he didn't start against Watford after that.
Yeah, I think this is potentially the first sign that we might see 2 up front, or certainly 2, an out-and-out centre forward, which is most likely to be a Phobe, and then a supporting striker, which could well be King. There are others in contention for that role. We had Graven on the bench yesterday, £7 million. I keep saying I want him to do well. I like him, but so far he hasn't done anything to justify the transfer fee, unfortunately. And yeah, I think I'm not a football manager. Eddie Howe knows more about football than me, but looking at a Phobe and having seen him in a few games, and he's scored a few goals, so that's what he's paid to do, and he's certainly got off to a good start. But the last couple of games, although one of them we were playing Arsenal, it's worth bearing in mind, of course. I think he needs a strike partner. He's too isolated otherwise, and whoever is going to get that role, if that's what Eddie decides to do, I think could hopefully bring the best out in Afobe, and we've seen some good stuff from him. But yeah, I think he needs somebody in a more advanced position with him, and I think he'd play well and maybe even more effectively with that. And yeah, we could see that going forward. In the moments that Josh King didn't get to the ball before Jack Butland, Glenn Johnson was trying to haul himself up off the floor. It's quite painful watching, actually, when I saw it on the replay. He went down in the initial phase of play, which I think came from a corner, near their own goal line. And then as the ball came back in, King didn't get there. He was trying to get back to his feet, but couldn't. And then Butland cleared it, and then he just went down again. Then the game stopped for a few minutes, and Johnson then went off and was ultimately substituted. There was a bit of, taking ages to get off the pitch, even when he was up and right by the touchline. The physio still kept him walking on the actual field of play, and he got plenty of jip from the Bournemouth fans behind the goal for that. And I don't think this can be much of a reason for what happened almost immediately afterwards. But I thought at the time, and I still kind of think, that it took the sting out of the momentum, that stoppage in play, that we had at the start of the second half. And although they lost Johnson, one of their players, and I haven't really looked to see if there's been any developments with his injury today, it kind of helped them in a strange way, didn't it?
Yeah, I couldn't believe it at the time when he was allowed to walk off the pitch and just kept heading towards as if he was walking out where the throw-in spot would be, rather than just behind the goal. And the referee, I don't know what he was doing. I can't understand why he didn't immediately usher him over and show him which way he needed to be walking.
Yeah, he should have actually booked the physio or done something like that. He should have done, because it was clear gamesmanship. But
yeah. I think it was just another example of Stoke's gamesmanship yesterday. I think it would be unfair to say, that was why we lost, but it was clearly part of their game plan. It definitely worked. But yeah, and then they went down to 10 men for a bit. And I thought that would be really our chance to kind of push on and take advantage of them having the extra man, and that is not what happened whatsoever.
No. Soon afterwards, they got their second and third goals. The second one was another nightmare from us, unfortunately. Like you said, Johnson went off, and they'd got the sub on by the time the goal was scored, because he wasn't involved in this goal, but he scored the third one. But for the second one, Walters, he picked up a routine pass down the line, but for some reason, Steve Cook let him get in behind him, and then John Walters was away, and Cook tried to recover, and he did in terms of catching up with Walters. But Walters cut inside in the penalty box, and Cook was fooled by that as well, and stumbled only a little bit. He didn't actually fall, but he just lost his balance slightly. But Walters had a bit of fortune. If you watch it back, you can see that he gets the ball stuck under his feet, but the fact that Cook is not right on him because he's losing his balance and having to recover from that allows Walters to get this little pass off to Afeli, and Afeli was allowed to run into the middle of our. Well, I was going to say the middle of our defence. It wasn't even the middle of our defence. In the middle of this big gap where our defence should have been. Simon Francis comes running back, runs to beyond the penalty spot, then turns around to look, and it's too late. And then there's a few other players, I think Richie, Smith might have been in the picture, but Efele has this huge, enormous space on the edge of the penalty area that he runs into, completely unmarked. Walters does this stub little pass, which isn't even that great a pass, but because there's no one else around, Efele just has to accelerate, and then, it was a clean shot, which gave Boritz no chance. And I only watched this so carefully because I heard Eddie Howe mention in the post-match interview about how we gave, he called him the goal scorer, I think, how he gave Efele, we gave him so much space. I didn't notice at the time, that's probably because I was watching the ball, but it was unbelievable how much space we gave him, wasn't it?
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. Defending was just so poor. Again, I think it's where we were 1-0 down, and so we had pushed an awful lot of people up that it just meant the midfield was almost non-existent, and they got away and just managed to cut, like you say, straight through the centre, and the defence didn't really seem to know how to respond. I don't know if they're used to having some of the protection of the five-man midfield in front of them this season, but yeah, it looked far too easy for them, and it was really poor. It just managed to get away and score so easily. And like you said, they did have so much space.
You would have expected, considering there was Walters and Efele were the only two players in the picture, both literally and figuratively, and you would have expected one of our players, it doesn't matter who, to be running alongside Efele, to actually be the person marking. I mean, I'm sure you've played football and it's like, well, pick him up, just stay with him, I can do that. I can't do what the professional players can do by any stretch of the imagination, but I could do that bit. And he just had so much room, and it was a really, really bad goal to concede, and then we were 2-0 down, and then, before we knew it, we were 3-0 down. And that was about 3 minutes later. They had a corner. Simon Francis headed it out, and it reached Juff, who found Shaqiri, and he kind of skinned Andrew Sermon. I dinked a little cross in from the byline, and then this was when the substitute Joselu scored. He's 6'3". I looked him up in the programme yesterday when I was writing this note. And the closest defender we had to him, well, there was a few of our defenders in the box, was Adam Smith, who I also looked up, who's 5'10", according to Wikipedia. I'm not sure if you can believe that, but you can see by looking at him, he isn't the tallest football player in the world. And he didn't make an effective challenge for the ball anyway. And Joselu just headed it in, and it was 3-0. And we did rally, and we'll talk about Richie's goal in a minute, in the rest of the half. But from a reasonably good start to the second half, it just felt like the whole house had fallen down around us, didn't it?
Yeah, it reminded me of the Arsenal game in that Arsenal was first, but Stoke second, and the third coming so soon after, that quick sucker punch. I almost feel like we need to be kind of being worried in that. I mean, the cliche is that, the scoring team is the weakest after they've just scored, but it seems like with us recently, it's that we're even weaker just after we've conceded a goal.
Yeah, I don't want to go on too much about the poor defending, but as usual, I watched the third goal through 3 or 4 times and watched what each of the main protagonists did. And Joselu, I'm sure that's not how you say his name, but anyway, he was just, there's a lot of our players in the box, but he just kind of runs around free, particularly when the ball is recycled. Like, Juff gets it goes to Shaqiri. We've defended the corner, but then we don't defend the second phase of play. And I sort of watched him, and he just sort of ran around a bit. He wasn't being marked by Adam Smith. Smith just happened to be the closest player to him of quite a few in the box. Somebody was marking him, I can't remember who it was, and he just lost them in this melee during the aftermath of the corner, when there was a lot of, people, I was going to say people traffic, that doesn't sound good, but people in the box. And then it was essentially a free header, because Adam Smith, who just happened to be the nearest player to him, didn't get the challenge in. And again, it wasn't a set piece, but it was the result of a set piece, and it demonstrated some of that vulnerability we have. And, 3-0. It didn't feel seriously like there was any coming back from it. I mean, we responded quickly. Matt Ritchie's goal, which was a good goal. It's a shame it didn't have more of a. Well, it didn't come earlier in the game. Even at 2-1, we'd have felt it was within reach. Charlie Daniels again, another excellent cross. Ritchie and King were kind of in the area where the ball was crossed into. It seemed to go through some very small gaps between the Stoke defence. Ritchie got there first. He was well positioned. Great technique. Fired in left-footed from 20 yards. He hasn't scored for a while. It was his third goal this season. I think he got 15 last season. But, I suppose like everybody else, I hoped that there was going to be some heroic Everton-style comeback in the 35, 40 minutes that were left or whatever. But deep down, I didn't really think that was going to happen. Did you?
No, not really. The moment it got to 3-0, I was kind of resigned to the fact that we were going to lose. I didn't really think, even at 3-1, I didn't think there was any kind of real chance of us pulling back for a point. Although I do think we played some nice stuff, like towards the second half of the second half. It's not. We did have a couple of chances, so maybe on another day we could have taken them, and there would have been some kind of heroic comeback. But I think they were comfortable at 3-0, and they were sitting back. I think even if we had pulled it back to 3-2, they would have piled on a bit more pressure, and it would have been a lot more difficult for us to get the third one. So you can't just kind of pick out the chances that we did have and go, we could have scored there. Well, that would have been 3-3, like could have been 4-3. So, yeah.
The thing I didn't realise until I saw Match of the Day last night was that they were forced to play this kind of makeshift defence. They had their number 5, Menuesa, went off at half time, and he was dealing with Benicophobic quite well. Texera came on, and then Juff had to go and play at the back, at full back, and apparently the 4 of them that were playing in defence had never played together before, and I think Jonathan Pearce was saying they'll probably never play together again as a back 4, and obviously they're missing Shawcross, who's been, I was really, I hate saying this, but pleased that he wasn't playing. He seemed to be the one who was nominated as the reason for their dip in form. Didn't really show yesterday. And so if there was a glimmer of hope that we were going to stage an heroic and unlikely comeback, that fact that they didn't really have a proper defence in terms of personnel was where that came from. I didn't realise that at the time, because I don't know their players that well, so I didn't really realise who was playing where. But yeah, it didn't really happen. I mean, like you said, we did have chances. They conceded a corner. Junior Stanislas took it, and it was headed on. It was by Juff, actually. I think it was challenged by Steve Cook, but Juff got the touch at the near post, and it fell to Benicophobe in space at the back post on the volley, which obviously isn't the easiest of skills. All the goals he's scored for us so far have been with his first touch. Not his first touch of the match, but his first touch when the ball comes to him. And this would have been another one. And like I said, it's not easy to do, but when I saw it falling to him, I thought, oh, well, this is a really good chance. And he just skied it over. And I think that was his only chance yesterday. I don't know about you, but after that, like in the seconds after that went in, I did think that was quite a bad miss.
I don't think it was necessarily a bad miss, but yeah, I think on another day you would have put money on him to score there. I was almost surprised that he didn't afterwards. I could have seen the back of the net rippling there. Yeah, not a terribly prolific day for Afobe. You're right, he didn't have an awful lot of chances. Of course, you can put that down to the service, especially with the type of player he is. He's not like King and even Wilson in that he'll run the channels and drift out wide and link up play and get in behind. He's much better at linking up play and dropping in, holding up the ball. And then, yeah, like you say, attacking those crosses on the first, with his first touch into the box. But I don't think we gave him an awful lot of those crosses yesterday.
No, we didn't. It was quite noticeable that we weren't playing to his strengths. And I think he's got quite a few, some of which you mentioned there. But we just didn't give him the service that he needed. I saw him pointing quite a lot where he wanted the ball, which was generally to his feet. And we were trying to play these kind of slide rule passes through for him to run onto. One thing I have noticed about him, I don't know about you, is that I expected him to be quicker. And he isn't a slouch. But when I look at King, Stanislas, Afobe's got bits to his game that I'm sure they'd love to have. But you can see their pace and the impact that it has. Afobe isn't as quick as I expected.
No. Well, those are the players that you want to be playing the ball over the top to, not Benik Afobe, whose kind of key attribute, I think, would be his strength. Because he might not necessarily be very tall, but he does seem very strong and hold off players almost, although I think he's a lot better than Wesley Thomas, but almost like Wesley Thomas used to for us.
Yeah, I quite liked Wes Thomas for a while, but then he kind of blotted his copybook with various shenanigans. There was a point under Lee Bradbury, he seemed to be scoring every week, but it all kind of dried up and went wrong off the pitch a little bit as well. But anyway, we don't need to worry about him anymore, and I'm sure Afobe will score soon, hopefully against Watford, and then he'll be, carrying on from what is definitely a good start in a Bournemouth shirt. We did have more chances, as you said. I mean, King's pace was quite effective. He got to the touchline a couple of times, kind of murdering the defender for pace, and squared the ball across the box. The one that stuck out for me was the first of those when Matt Ritchie, who must have been, in the absence of Ryan Fraser, the smallest player in the squad yesterday, and he just failed to get there, didn't he? It must have been like half an inch. He didn't make contact with the ball, and that was head in the hand stuff, wasn't it?
Yeah, a couple of those moments from King where he just seemed to skin the defender and put it across the face of goal. You just think any touch from any of our players, if we could have got to the ball first, probably would have scored.
Yeah, I think Stanislas had the other one, and he did get the ball, but it was blocked when he had the strike. He was only about 6 yards out, but no, effective from King. And I mean, he's come on quite a bit since he started the season with us. Although I think he could do with adding a few more goals to his game, but yeah, he's certainly a more positive option, and I'm happier to see him on the pitch than I was at the start of the season. And another positive option that we could have going forward is Wanai Turby, who came on in the 75th minute for Junior Stanislas. I don't think Eddie would have brought him on if we'd have been 3-1 up or even 2-1 down. But I think it was at the point where Eddie thought, especially the way things were going and the way we were playing, Eddie thought, well, we're probably not going to win this game. In fact, we are probably going to lose it. And, if I can get Iturbe on, get something positive out of the game in terms of, giving him more minutes on the pitch in English football and him playing quite well. And I did think he played quite well when he came on. So he threw him on. And I thought he looked good yesterday. I thought that he he showed a lot of skillful touches. He was running Juff ragged at first. I mean, Juff was already on a booking. He was playing at the back, which he's not used to. And Iturbe was playing on our left, and he was their right back at the time, Juff, and he was skinning him alive. But then, for some reason, which I haven't been able to fathom, him and Richie swapped sides. Did you find that a bit odd?
Yeah, because, like you said, I mean, Juff's not slow by any means, but he's a striker playing at right back, and Iturbe had already beaten him a couple of times. So I don't know why I didn't feel like there was any need to change it, unless kind of the thinking was that Iturbe puts in less crosses on that left-hand side than Richie would, and so maybe Richie could deliver a couple of early balls in for Afobe at the back post, but we didn't see that either. I thought it was really odd, and I think that right-hand side of Smith and Iturbe from a defensive point of view, I mean, I thought Iturbe played really well, and I think he's finally starting to kind of learn our philosophy. In that, in previous appearances, it didn't really seem against West Ham. He didn't even look like he knew where he was supposed to be. No. And then, from what I've heard against Portsmouth, he didn't seem to quite understand just how much we expect our wingers to track back. But I thought he did that really well.
Against Portsmouth, I thought he was better than West Ham, but also somewhat taken aback by the style of football he had found himself in the middle of against a decent passing League Two side, but a League Two side in England nonetheless. And it was just so frantic and physical, and I think he was probably a little overcome by that. But yeah, better yesterday, definitely. Looked a real handful at in the times when he did get the ball. And yeah, now I would be surprised to see him start a game anytime soon. But that said, Mark Pugh wasn't his greatest game yesterday, taken off at half-time. Junior Stanislas definitely wasn't his greatest game yesterday, was obviously replaced by Iturbe. And Matt Ritchie came on, did well, scored a good goal, but his place on the team sheet is not guaranteed at the moment. So from one Iturbe's point of view, his chances of getting in the team, possibly even starting a game, are probably higher now than they have been at any time since he came on against West Ham. So yeah, you never know. That could be a kind of wild card that could pay off. And obviously we've got Max Gradle coming back at some point. So yeah, hopefully that will prove to be a factor in us accruing enough points to stay up. The game kind of petered out after that, I thought. I think Boris saved from Joselu. There was 5 minutes of injury time. I expected there to be more. I suppose the only feature towards the end of the game that stuck out was just more time wasting, play acting, and general cynical gamesmanship from Stoke to make sure that they got the 3 points without any last minute scares. And it was probably true, and I mentioned him already from what went on in the first half, but it was probably true that Graham Scott, the referee, had another, unfortunately for him, poor appearance as a referee in the Premier League, and he got a bit of jip at the end of the game from the crowd. Not loads, but that you can always tell when the referees incurred the wrath of the crowd, because it's as they walk off and near the tunnel, the kind of booing gets a bit louder. But that said, there was two separate things going on there. One was we played badly and essentially Stoke deserved to win. The other one was Graham Scott did not referee that well and looks like he's going to struggle to get many more games in the Premier League if he keeps refereeing like that. But those two things cannot be put together. We didn't lose because of the ref, did we?
No, and I did say this after the game. I think the referee had a poor game. I don't know how much of that is down to, rose-tinted glasses, but he seemed really inconsistent with his cards and some of the free kicks that he was giving. You know how we like to, take free kicks quickly and get the ball down and just get on with it. And for the most part, he let us do that. But there were a couple of moments, particularly towards the end there, where it was just so frustrating the way he just kept calling it back. And a couple of the times it was only so he could have a chat with one of ours or one of their players. I didn't see the need to stop the game, especially if he wasn't even going to show a card.
Now, you do wonder what they're saying. I always wonder if they're using their first names or their nicknames to try and pal up with them, and you do hear about that, but you never quite know what's true and what isn't. But it's another home defeat. I mean, we've only won 3 times at home. Second worst, I learnt today, I hadn't really thought about this before, the second worst in the Premier League to Villa. They've managed to get 10 points at home. We've only got 13. And, well, February is again proving to be a difficult month for us. We obviously won at Palace and everything seemed hunky-dory. Now it seems anything but. Are you worried about the rest of the season, or do you think we're gonna manage to get across the line and stay in the division?
Well, I'm not a fan of that stat. That's the first time I've heard that.
Yeah, nor am I.
And, I've attended every home game this season, and at no point until now have I really been that worried about our home form, but hearing that, maybe I should be more worried. As far as, relegation goes, maintained over the last week or two that I think we'll stay up, kind of solely on the basis that I think that there are a lot of teams worse than us in the division at this point. I think Villa, are essentially down.
I think they are now. I mean, that was a real knife a dagger in the heart for them today, wasn't it? So I think, I think we can say Villa have gone.
And then you've got Sunderland, who, I kind of was writing them off too, but they got the point against us, which was obviously an important one because we're down there with them. Win against United, and suddenly they're not quite so far off. We know Sam Allardyce has a knack for keeping teams up, so I'm not quite as confident on them going down as I was. But I still think especially when our strongest 18, which we should have towards the end of the season, provided Wilson's fitness, I think our 18 is a lot stronger than theirs. And then Swansea and Newcastle, I don't think really are anything that special either. And then Norwich, I kind of rated them a bit above those two teams, but their defending recently has been absolutely shocking. And so I think Norwich see them going down as well.
Yeah, their morale must be low because they've been in good positions. I mean, against Liverpool, they came back, and if they'd have drawn that game 4-4 or whatever it was, it would have felt like a win, much like ours against Everton. But they conceded very late. Adam Lallana doing us a favour there, remembering where he came from. And, so like a real hammer blow. And then yesterday, 2-0 up and throwing that away and drawing 2-2. So from a potential 6 points, 4, that would have been, they got 1. And it's not just the amount of points, but also the nature of the 2 games, and they've lost other games as well. They lost to us, didn't they? So, and their transfer dealings so far haven't really paid dividends. Sunderland's have. Ours kind of have. And, Newcastle, it's difficult to know. You don't really know which team's going to turn up each week. I was thinking they're going to stay up. They're going to, they seem to have steadied the ship, but then they start, I suppose losing to Chelsea 5-1. Chelsea haven't had a good season, but, they're playing better. And I guess if they do play at the top of their game against a team like Newcastle, and if they played at the top of the game like us, they probably would have thrashed us. But luckily, we got them at, a good time, and those points could be very valuable at the end of the season. But, we'll wait and see. But as you say, there are enough teams down there to think, we can finish above 3 of them. But it's easy to say. It's not necessarily easy to do. Just one last thing before we wind up, Sam. It emerged today that Sean McDonald, who's had minimal time on the pitch this season, but is still a player and a person that I think most Bournemouth fans admire, signed a new 1-year contract. Did that surprise you?
It did. For a moment in that January transfer window, I thought he might have been one of those that would leave us, whether that be on loan or permanently. But the fact that, Eddie's given him a new deal kind of suggests to me that maybe he rates, both McDonald and O'Kane a little bit better than we do. Quite a few people were calling for how much we needed to sign a central midfielder in January. Eddie obviously didn't do that. Now he's given Sean McDonald a new contract. Quite willing to be proved wrong. I like Sean McDonald, definitely as a person. I like him as a player. He hasn't had an awful lot of game time. Coming up to 3 years now, really. I rated him above Junior Stanislas last season, and Stanislas has really come into his own this season, so I can't see, if Eddie rates him, why Sean McDonald couldn't do the same, really.
Yeah, I think that's true. Eddie does seem to be able to get an awful lot out of players, and he's done it time and again. I think there's other things going on, much like there was with Jan Kermagon when we gave him a new contract for a year at the start of the season. One is it can retain some sell-on value should McDonald leave in the summer or next January, and the other is it rewards the player, because the new contract is obviously going to be on better terms than he's on at the moment, and there'll be a little new contract signing bonus as well. I say little, it's probably about as much as most of us earn in a year, and he's been there with Eddie for a long time. You get the feeling he's the kind of squad member that Eddie loves to have around. He's hard working, reliable, does everything the manager asks, etc., etc. So he gets a little bit of a financial windfall from that, and then should he move on to another club, be it in the Championship or probably would be in the Championship, then he can negotiate a really decent deal for himself in terms of his wages and that on the back of this contract. So it's kind of nice that the club do that. There's obviously something in it for them in terms of sell-on value. So everyone's a winner, really. I don't think we'll see a great deal of him on the pitch. I think we'll probably see him next week against Everton. But yeah, I think that much like Jan, although people probably expected to see a bit more of Jan this season in terms of appearances, nobody will really resent that if it is the case, all those slightly convoluted reasons that I've described that he might have been given the new contract. And if it had been given to perhaps a less popular player, then it may not have gone down quite so well. But he's a long way from being the Royce Wiggins of the piece. So Royce still hasn't appeared in public since his transfer. So I'm looking forward to that. Maybe next week against Everton. Anyway, Sam, I always feel, and this season's been a particular year for that. A little bit sorry for anybody who comes on the podcast for the first time on the back of a negative result, and in yesterday's case, a pretty negative performance. But thanks ever so much, because you've done a great job, and it's always good to hear the opinions of somebody else. So hopefully we'll hear from you again before the end of the season.
Yeah, sure. It was good to be on. Yeah, you're right. It is a shame to kind of be having to talk about such a well, it was for the most part a poor performance as well as a poor result, and that's really the disappointing thing. But there was plenty to talk about, and it's not like we didn't have chances, and there's still a while to go in the season, so I'll try not to be too negative about it.
Good man, thanks a lot.
Yeah, it was good speaking to you.
Sterling work there from Sam. Just a shame he couldn't make his podcast debut in happier circumstances. After a loveless Valentine's, let's hope we can rekindle the romance against Everton in the FA Cup next weekend. So up the cherries in all departments, and goodbye.
This podcast is sponsored by the White Bear, your local micropub on Southbourne Grove, where you can't watch the game, but you can definitely talk about it. Head to the White Bear on any AFCB match day wearing your team shirt and receive 30p off each pint. Check out www.thewhitebear.co.uk.